I am Sarah, 34 years old and a chief financial officer who specializes in forensic accounting. People think numbers are cold, but I know they are the only things that never lie. My husband Jason built his life on charisma and perception. I built mine on leverage and liquidity. He forgot that difference and it cost him everything. My husband asked for a divorce. He looked me in the eye and said, "I want the house, the cars, everything except our son." My lawyer begged me to fight. I said, "Give it all to him." Everyone thought I had lost my mind. At the final hearing, I signed everything over. He smiled. He did not know I had already won. He smiled until his lawyer turned pale when the first bank notification hit his phone. Before I tell you how I destroyed him without raising my voice, hit that subscribe button if you believe that greed is always a trap. The end of my marriage did not happen in a lawyer's office or during a screaming match in our bedroom. It happened under the crystal chandeliers of the Pierre Hotel in Manhattan, surrounded by 200 of our employees and industry rivals. It was the 10th anniversary gala of Vantage Marketing, the company my husband Jason believed he built, and the company I knew I had engineered. I stood near the bar nursing a sparkling water. I watched Jason work the room. He was in his element wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my father made in a year. He clapped men on the back and kissed the cheeks of investors' wives. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. I was the invisible hand that kept the castle walls from crumbling. For a decade, I had stayed in the shadows. I managed the cash flow, I negotiated the lines of credit, and I restructured the debt every time Jason made a reckless acquisition. To the world, I was just Sarah, the quiet wife who sometimes helped with the books. To the bank, I was the personal guarantor of every single dollar Vantage Marketing borrowed. Jason tapped his spoon against a champagne flute. The sharp ring cut through the chatter. The room went silent. All eyes turned to the stage. He adjusted the microphone, flashing that $1,000,000 smile that had charmed me 10 years ago. "Thank you all for coming." Jason boomed his voice, projecting confidence. "Tonight is about celebrating a decade of dominance. They said we would not survive the first year. They said the market was too crowded. But look at us now. Record profits, record growth, and it is all because of vision." The crowd applauded. I clapped politely. I knew the real numbers. The record profits he bragged about were actually unrealized gains I had creatively structured to prevent a liquidity crisis. The growth was funded by a massive balloon loan that was due in exactly 35 days. Without my daily maneuvering of the accounts, Vantage Marketing was not a powerhouse. It was a ticking time bomb. But Jason did not know that. He never read the financial reports I put on his desk. He only looked at the revenue column, never the liabilities. "I have an announcement," Jason said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "To take Vantage to the next level, we need fresh energy. We need bold leadership. That is why, effective immediately, I am appointing a new creative director who will also serve as my strategic partner. Please welcome the woman who has revolutionized our branding in just 3 weeks, Tiffany Banks." My stomach turned over. Tiffany. I knew the name. She was the 24-year-old intern who had started 2 months ago. The heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Tiffany walked in. She was wearing a red dress that was inappropriate for a corporate gala, tight enough to show every curve and slit high enough to make the board members uncomfortable. She walked to the stage with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She stood next to Jason and he wrapped his arm around her waist. His hand lingered too low. The room was confused. People glanced at me. I kept my face perfectly still. I had practiced this mask for years, the mask of the supportive, oblivious wife. But inside my mind was racing. Strategic partner. That title did not exist. And one more thing Jason said, looking directly at me for the first time that night. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth they used to hold. "Sarah, darling, could you come up here for a moment?" I walked through the crowd. I felt their eyes on me. Pity, curiosity, malice. I climbed the stairs to the stage. Jason reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. I thought it was a gift, perhaps a voucher for a spa day, his usual way of apologizing for ignoring me. He handed it to me. The microphone was still on. "I think it is time we both started new chapters," Jason said, his voice amplified across the silent ballroom. "You have been unhappy for a long time, Sarah. I can feel it. You are tired. You want a simpler life. So I am giving you your freedom." I opened the envelope. My fingers did not tremble. Inside, there were no spa vouchers. There was a petition for dissolution of marriage, divorce papers, served to me on stage at our company anniversary in front of everyone we knew. Tiffany giggled. It was a sharp, cruel sound. She covered her mouth, pretending to be shy, but her eyes were gleaming with triumph. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at Jason. He was waiting for me to cry. He was waiting for me to scream, to make a scene to prove to everyone that I was the unstable emotional burden he had likely painted me to be. He wanted a show. I did not give him one. I folded the papers and placed them back in the envelope. I leaned into the microphone. The feedback whined slightly. "Thank you for the transparency, Jason," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used when I told the auditors they were looking at the wrong ledger. "I will review these with legal counsel. Enjoy your party." I turned and walked off the stage. The silence was deafening. I could hear the rustle of my own silk dress. I did not run. I walked at a measured pace, head high, straight to the exit. I did not look back, but I could feel Jason's confusion burning into my back. He had expected an explosion. Instead, he got ice. I signaled for the valet. As I waited for my car, I took a deep breath of the cold New York air. My mind was not on the heartbreak. It was already running a risk assessment. Jason had made his move. He thought he was discarding a used asset. He did not realize he had just triggered the liquidation clause of his entire life. The drive home to our penthouse on Park Avenue was a blur. I went straight to the nursery. Leo was asleep. My 6-year-old son lay curled up under his weighted blanket, his breathing rhythmic and soft. Leo was the only pure thing in my world. He had been diagnosed with autism at age 3. He needed routine, he needed expensive therapies, and he needed a calm environment. Jason struggled to connect with him. Jason wanted a son who could play quarterback, not a son who lined up toy cars in perfect color gradients and covered his ears when the blender ran. I sat in the armchair next to Leo's bed and waited. I knew Jason would not stay at the party long. The adrenaline of his public victory would fade and he would come to gloat in private. I heard the front door open an hour later, then the click of Tiffany's heels on the marble foyer. He had brought her here, to our home, before I had even moved out. I walked out to the living room. Jason was pouring scotch. Tiffany was wandering around, running her hands over my furniture, touching my curtains. "Oh, wow," she said, her voice grating. "This view is insane. Jason, baby, we have to change these sofas, though. Gray is so depressing." She saw me and stopped. She did not look embarrassed. She looked at me like I was the intruder. "You are still here?" Jason asked. He took a sip of his scotch. "I thought you would have gone to a hotel, or maybe your mother's." "We need to talk about the terms," I said. I ignored Tiffany completely. Jason laughed. He set his glass down on the coaster I had bought in Italy. He walked over to his briefcase and pulled out another copy of the papers. "There is nothing to talk about, Sarah. My lawyers drafted this very carefully. Since we never signed a prenuptial agreement, and since the company's growth happened during the marriage, you might think you are entitled to half. But you are not." He tossed the papers on the coffee table. "I am filing for full ownership of the penthouse he listed, counting on his fingers. I am keeping the Hamptons Beach House. I am keeping the Porsche and the Range Rover. And obviously, I am retaining 100% of Vantage Marketing. You were never an employee, Sarah. You were just helping out. You have no official title, no equity." He was right about the title. I had kept my name off the payroll to avoid tax complications for the business in the early days. I had worked as a consultant through a Shell LLC. "And what do I get?" I asked. Jason shrugged. "You get your freedom, and I will give you a generous cash settlement. $50,000, that should be enough to get you a nice apartment in Queens." $50,000. That was less than the credit limit on the card he had just used to buy Tiffany's dress. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had supported for 10 years, the man whose reputation I had polished until it shined. "And Leo?" I asked. The room went quiet. Tiffany stopped pretending to examine a vase. She looked at Jason, her eyes widening. Jason sighed. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of annoyance he used when a waiter got his order wrong. "Sarah, look," he said. Tiffany and we are starting fresh. We are going to travel. We are going to be the face of the brand, a global brand." He paused, taking another drink of scotch for courage. He is a lot of work, Sarah. The therapists, the special schools, the meltdowns. It is not really the lifestyle Tiffany is ready for. She is young. We want to have our own kids. Kids who can, take over the business one day. My blood ran cold. It was a physical sensation like ice water in my veins. He was not just discarding me. He was discarding his son because Leo did not fit the aesthetic of his new life. So you are saying, I clarified, my voice dropping to a whisper, that you want the house, the cars, the company, and the money, but you do not want your son. Jason looked relieved that I had said it for him. It is better for him to be with you, he said quickly. You have the patience for it. I will pay child support, obviously, the state minimum, but I do not want custody, not even weekends. It would just confuse him. Tiffany walked over and draped herself on Jason's arm. Yeah, she said. Plus, Jason says the kid makes weird noises. It creeps me out. I looked at Tiffany. Then I looked at Jason. In that moment, the last thread of attachment I had to him snapped. The grief vanished. The shock vanished. All that was left was clarity, violent, crystal-clear clarity. He wanted a war, but he had forgotten that he was fighting the supply lines. I stood up. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the pen lying next to the papers. Okay, I said. Jason blinked. Okay, I want it in writing, I said. I want a clause added right now. You waive all parental rights to Leo, full legal and physical custody to me. No visitation, no decision-making power. He is solely mine. In exchange, I will sign over the house, the cars, and the company. Jason's eyes lit up. He looked like he had just won the lottery. He thought I was being emotional. He thought I was a desperate mother choosing her child over her financial future. He grabbed the pen from my hand and scribbled the clause in the margin of the document. He initialed it and pushed it back to me. Done, he said, grinning. You take the boy. I take the empire. I signed the document. The ink flowed smoothly onto the page. With every letter of my name, I felt lighter. I will be out by morning, I said. I went back to the nursery. I packed Leo's clothes into 2 suitcases. I packed my laptop. I did not take any jewelry. I did not take any of the designer clothes Jason had bought me, so I would look the part of a CEO's wife. I took only what I had before I met him. My mind. As I zipped up the suitcase, I checked my phone. It was 2:00 a.m. The banking systems in Tokyo were just opening. I logged into the Vantage Marketing corporate admin portal. I did not steal any money. That would be illegal. I simply canceled the automatic renewal of the revolving line of credit that I had personally secured with my own credit rating. Without that line of credit, the company's payroll account would hit 0 in 4 days. Then I opened my email. I drafted a message to the private equity firm that held the mortgage on the penthouse. I attached the divorce decree I had just photographed, specifically the page where Jason claimed full ownership of the property. I reminded them that the mortgage had a change of guarantor clause. Since I was no longer the guarantor, the full balance of $6 million was callable immediately. I hit send. I looked down at Leo. He was still sleeping peacefully. Jason had taken everything he could see. The brick and mortar, the steel and glass. But he had no idea that he had just taken ownership of a sinking ship, and he had thrown the only captain overboard. I lay down on the floor next to Leo's bed and closed my eyes. For the first time in 10 years, I slept without worrying about the future. The countdown had begun. Jason had 30 days until the balloon payments popped, and when they did, I would be watching from the front row. The next morning, the sun was bright and harsh. I woke up to the sound of crashing. I sat up, my heart pounding. It came from the kitchen. I gently shook Leo awake. Leo, baby. We are going on an adventure, I whispered. Put on your headphones. He blinked his eyes unfocused, but he obeyed. He put on his noise-canceling headphones, his shield against the world. I took his hand and we walked out into the hallway. The crashing sound was Tiffany. She was in the kitchen throwing my collection of vintage tea sets into the trash can. One by one, the delicate porcelain shattered against the metal bin. Smash, smash, smash. Jason was sitting at the island drinking coffee and scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up as his mistress destroyed my belongings. "Oops," Tiffany said, holding up a cracked saucer. "I am just making space. Jason said I could redecorate, and this grandma stuff has to go." She dropped it. It broke into 3 pieces. I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down. It was just china. It was just clay. "I am leaving now," I said. Jason looked up. He smirked. "Leaving so soon?" "You have until noon, you know." "I wanted to beat the traffic," I said. I walked to the door, holding Leo's hand. "Hey, Sarah," Jason called out. I stopped my hand on the doorknob. "Don't expect a reference letter." He laughed. "And good luck with whatever you do. Maybe you can find a job as a bookkeeper or something." I turned around slowly. I looked at the man who had been my husband. I looked at the woman who was currently trying to figure out how to work my espresso machine. "Thank you, Jason," I said. "You have given me everything I needed." I opened the door and walked out. The heavy click of the lock behind me sounded like the starting gun of a race. We got into my 10-year-old sedan, the one car Jason hadn't bothered to ask for because it wasn't flashy enough. I buckled Leo in. "Where are we going?" Leo asked, his voice small. "We are going to Uncle Marcus's house," I said. Marcus was Jason's brother-in-law, married to Jason's older sister. He was also the sharpest corporate attorney in the state, and the only person in Jason's family who treated me with respect. I started the car. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked up at the penthouse balcony. Tiffany was standing there waving at me mockingly. She held a glass of orange juice and a toast. "Enjoy it," I whispered. I drove toward the highway. My phone buzzed. It was an automated alert from the bank. Subject credit facility update. Status terminated. Action required immediate repayment of outstanding balance $4.2 million. I smiled. The first domino had just fallen. I arrived at Marcus's house 40 minutes later. It was a modest house in the suburbs, far from the glitz of the city. Marcus was waiting in the driveway. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a posture that commanded respect. He saw the suitcases. He saw Leo. He didn't look surprised. He walked over and opened my car door. "He did it," Marcus asked quietly. "He did it," I confirmed. "And the papers signed. He waived all rights to Leo. He took all the assets." "And the liabilities?" Marcus asked, a knowing look in his eye. I handed him the flash drive I had kept in my pocket. "He took the liabilities too," I said. "He just doesn't know it yet." Marcus let out a low whistle. He looked at the flash drive, then back at me. "You know, Sarah," he said, "I should feel bad for him. He is family. But after the way he treated you—" He picked up Leo's suitcase. "Come inside," Marcus said. "My wife is making pancakes. Let's watch the show." I walked into the house, leaving the cold wind behind. I was homeless. I was unemployed. I was a single mother to a special needs child. But as I sat down at Marcus's kitchen table and watched Leo happily eating a pancake, I felt a surge of power. Jason had the penthouse, but he also had the mortgage. Jason had the company, but he also had the payroll he couldn't meet. Jason had the mistress, but he also had a woman who would leave him the second the credit card was declined. I had Leo, and I had the remote control to the demolition. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from a client, the biggest client Vantage Marketing had. "Dear Sarah, we heard rumors of your departure. Please confirm. As stated in our contract, our agreement is contingent on your direct oversight of the account. If you are no longer with Vantage, we will be exercising our right to terminate immediately." I typed a reply with one hand while stroking Leo's hair with the other. "Dear Mr. Henderson, I am no longer with Vantage. I am starting my own firm. I would be happy to discuss a new contract with you on Monday." I hit send. That was the second domino. Back at the penthouse, Jason was probably just finishing his coffee. He was probably thinking about which car to drive today. He had no idea that in about 2 hours, his finance director would be walking into his office with a very pale face, holding a report that showed the company had 0 operating cash. I took a sip of orange juice. It tasted sweet, the taste of freedom, but the real test was coming. Jason was arrogant, but he wasn't alone. He had his mother, a woman who made Machiavelli look like a kindergarten teacher, and he had his high-priced lawyers. When the money dried up, they would come for me. They would try to claim fraud. They would try to take Leo back just to hurt me. I was ready. I had documented every email, every text message, every approval Jason had blindly signed for years. This wasn't just a divorce, it was a hostile takeover. And I had just acquired the most valuable asset of all, the truth. If you are watching this and wondering how a man could be so blind, let me tell you, ego is a hell of a drug, but the withdrawal symptoms are deadly. Stay tuned, because what happened next made the divorce look like a tea party. When Tiffany tried to use the corporate card at Gucci later that afternoon, she didn't just get declined, she got arrested. And you will not believe who she called for bail. The morning sun had barely cleared the skyline when the freight elevator dinged. It was not a polite sound. It was the sound of an invasion. I had barely slept, spending the few hours of darkness comforting Leo, who sensed the tectonic shift in our household atmosphere. I was in the kitchen making Leo's specific breakfast of oatmeal with exactly 3 strawberries arranged in a triangle when the doors slid open. Tiffany did not walk in alone. She brought a small army. 3 movers in blue jumpsuits followed her, carrying boxes that looked brand new. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk robe that I recognized immediately. It was mine, a gift from my mother for my 30th birthday, hand-embroidered in Kyoto. I had left it in the master closet, assuming I would have time to pack it. Clearly, the looting had already begun. She stood in the center of the foyer, clapping her hands. "Okay, boys," she announced, her voice echoing off the marble floors I had paid to polish last week. "Everything beige needs to go. I want the energy in here to be vibrant. Think Miami Club, not funeral home." One of the movers looked at me. He was an older man holding a roll of bubble wrap. He hesitated, sensing the tension. I was still wearing my pajamas, standing between my son and this woman who was erasing my existence. "Ma'am," the mover asked, looking to me for confirmation. "Don't look at her," Tiffany snapped. "She is just the outgoing tenant. I am the lady of the house. Start with these vases. They are hideous." I watched as she pointed to a Ming Dynasty vase I had acquired at an auction in London. It was not just decor, it was an investment asset that had appreciated 15% in the last 2 years. "Careful," I said involuntarily. "That is worth more than your car." Tiffany lowered her sunglasses and looked at me with a pitying smile. "It is old, Sarah. Just because something is expensive doesn't mean it has style. Besides, Jason said I have an unlimited budget to modernize. Modern means out with the old." She made a shooing motion at me. "Aren't you supposed to be packing? The truck is coming at noon." I felt a small hand grip my leg. Leo was hiding behind me, his noise-canceling headphones tight over his ears. He was rocking slightly. This was his sanctuary. The open plan of the penthouse was designed specifically for him, with clear sightlines and soothing colors. Now strangers were filling it with chaos. "We are packing," I said, keeping my voice level. "But we have rights. You cannot just throw out my property before the settlement is finalized." Tiffany laughed. It was a hollow sound. "Settlement. Honey, Jason told me you signed everything over. He said you were so desperate to keep the kid that you gave up the kingdom." She walked past me into the living room. She began pointing at furniture. "That sofa goes. That rug goes. Oh, and this?" She stopped at the corner of the room near the floor-to-ceiling windows. This was Leo's sensory corner. It was filled with his specialized equipment, a weighted swing, a tactile wall with different fabrics, and his bins of color-coded blocks. It looked messy to an outsider, but to Leo, it was the only place where the world made sense. "What is this junk?" Tiffany asked, kicking a bin of blocks. They scattered across the floor with a loud clatter. Leo let out a sharp cry. He dropped to his knees and began frantically trying to organize the blocks back into their chromatic order: red, orange, yellow. His hands were shaking. "Stop it," I said, stepping forward. "That is his therapy equipment. Do not touch it." Tiffany looked down at my son with genuine distaste. "It looks like a daycare center in here," she said. "I am turning this corner into a yoga meditation space. I need the feng shui to flow. This clutter is blocking my energy." She turned to the movers. "Bag it up, all of it. If it doesn't fit in the trash chute, take it down to the dumpster." "No," I said. My voice was no longer calm. I moved between the mover and my son. "You are not throwing away his medical equipment." Tiffany rolled her eyes. She pulled out her phone. "Jason?" She whined into the receiver. "She is being difficult. She's yelling at me. I feel threatened." I stood my ground. I helped Leo pick up his blocks, whispering to him that it was okay, that we were playing a game. 2 minutes later, Jason stormed out of the master bedroom. He was dressed in a suit, smelling of expensive cologne, ready to go to the office and play CEO. He saw me on the floor with Leo. He saw Tiffany pouting by the window. "Sarah, get up," he commanded. "You are embarrassing yourself." "She is trying to throw away Leo's sensory swing," I said, standing up. "It took us 6 months to get that custom made." "It is an eyesore," Jason said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Tiffany is right. We are hosting a dinner party on Friday. We can't have the place looking like a special ed classroom." "He is your son, Jason," I said. "This is his home until noon." "Not anymore," Jason said. He walked over to me, closing the distance until he was invading my personal space. He lowered his voice so the movers wouldn't hear, but his tone was venomous. "Listen to me closely, Sarah. You signed the papers. That means this apartment and everything inside it belongs to me. If I want to burn it, I can. If I want to turn it into a shrine to Tiffany, I can." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened the banking app. "I was going to be nice," he said. "I was going to let you keep the joint checking account active for a few days so you could pay for the movers and a deposit on a rental. But if you are going to cause a scene in my house, I will tap this screen right now." He held the phone up. I saw the balance. It was the account I used to pay for Leo's private occupational therapy and his specialized dietary needs. "I will freeze it, Sarah," he threatened. "I will report it as compromised. It will take the bank weeks to unlock it. Do you have enough cash in your purse to pay for Leo's medication this afternoon? Do you have enough to pay for a hotel tonight?" I looked at him. I looked at the man who had once promised to protect us. He was using our son's health as a bargaining chip to let his mistress redecorate. The leverage. He thought he had the leverage. I looked at Leo. He had stopped crying and was watching me. He needed me to be strong. If I fought now, if I called the police or threw a vase, Jason would freeze the account. Leo would suffer. I needed that money to bridge the gap until my plan detonated. I had to lose this battle to win the war. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I forced my face to crumble just enough to satisfy Jason's ego. "Please," I whispered, "don't freeze the account. I need to buy his insulin." Jason smirked. He felt powerful. He felt like the alpha. "Then tell your brat to stop crying and get your trash out of Tiffany's yoga corner. You have 1 hour. He turned to Tiffany and kissed her on the forehead. "Handle it, babe. I have a company to run." Jason left. The door clicked shut. Tiffany beamed. She snapped her fingers at the movers. "You heard the man. Bag it up." I knelt down next to Leo. "Leo, listen to Mommy," I said softly. "We are going to pack the blocks. We are going to leave the swing." He looked at the swing, his eyes filling with tears again. "It is okay," I said, squeezing his hand. "We are going to get a better one. A much better one." I spent the next hour in a state of controlled humiliation. I watched the movers rip the sensory swing from the ceiling bolts, leaving gaping holes in the plaster. They tossed it into a black garbage bag like it was construction debris. I watched Tiffany direct them to clear out my home office. She picked up my framed degree in forensic accounting and tossed it face down into a box of kitchen appliances. "Boring," she muttered. I moved mechanically. I packed Leo's clothes. I packed the few personal items I could carry. Every time I walked past Tiffany, she made a point of criticizing something. My clothes were frumpy. My books were pretentious. My shampoo was cheap. She was trying to break me. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to scream so she could tell Jason I was crazy. But as I folded Leo's shirts, my mind was not on her insults. I was calculating. Jason had threatened to freeze the account. That meant he believed the account had money in it. He hadn't checked the morning ledger yet. He didn't know that the joint account was linked to the overdraft protection of the business account. And he didn't know that the business account was currently hemorrhaging cash because I had canceled the bridge loan. Let them have the furniture, I thought. Let them have the view. At 11:55 a.m., I stood by the front door with 2 suitcases and a frightened little boy. Tiffany was lounging on the sofa, my sofa, drinking a green juice. She didn't stand up. "Leave the keys on the console," she called out without looking at me. "And make sure you didn't take the spare fob." Jason needs it for the dog walker. We are getting a purebred." I placed the keys on the silver tray. The metal made a final decisive clink. "Goodbye, Tiffany," I said. She waved a hand dismissively. "Close the door tight. The draft ruins the climate control." I walked out into the hallway. The heavy door swung shut, sealing my past life inside. I looked down at Leo. He was clutching his bag of blocks. "Did we lose Mommy?" he asked. He had never seen me back down before. I crouched down so I was eye level with him. I fixed his collar. "No, Leo. We didn't lose. We just made a tactical retreat." We took the elevator down to the garage. My sedan was parked in the corner, dwarfed by Jason's collection of luxury vehicles. As I loaded the trunk, I looked up at the security camera. I knew Jason often checked the feed from his phone. I wanted him to see this. I wanted him to see the defeated wife loading her own bags, driving away in a sensible car. I wanted him to feel safe. Because a man who feels safe is a man who stops checking his blind spots. I got into the driver's seat. I checked the time. Noon. The transfer of the house title was officially recorded at the county clerk's office at this exact minute. The liability shift was complete. I pulled out of the garage into the bright, harsh light of the street. I didn't cry. I didn't look back at the towering building that had been my prison. I reached over and turned on the radio. Music. Something loud. "Let's go to Uncle Marcus's," I said to Leo. As I merged into traffic, my phone pinged. It was a text from the pharmacy. "Prescription ready for pickup. Copay $450. I drove to the pharmacy. I handed the pharmacist the card connected to the joint account Jason had threatened to freeze. I held my breath as she swiped it. Approved. Jason hadn't frozen it. He was too arrogant. He thought the threat was enough. I took the medication. I bought Leo a chocolate bar. "Enjoy it, Jason," I whispered to the empty air, "because that is the last thing you are ever going to buy with that card that actually works." I got back in the car. The invasion was over. I had survived the eviction. Now it was time to start the siege. Tiffany thought she had moved into a palace. She didn't know I had just handed her the keys to a foreclosure. 2 days after Tiffany invaded my home, I found myself pulling into the crushed gravel driveway of Jason's parents' estate in Greenwich. I was not there to socialize. I was there because Jason's mother, Eleanor, had insisted on seeing Leo. She claimed it was because she missed her grandson, but I knew the truth. She wanted an audience. She wanted to parade Jason's new life in front of his old one. I parked my sedan far away from the main entrance, hidden behind a row of manicured hedges. I checked Leo's noise-canceling headphones. "Remember, buddy," I whispered. "If it gets too loud, we go to the car. Immediate extract." Leo nodded, clutching his bag of blocks. We walked toward the backyard. The smell of expensive charcoal and grilled Wagyu beef hit me first. Then the sound of laughter. Not genuine laughter, but the performative, high-pitched laughter of people trying to convince themselves they are happy. The scene that greeted me was a masterclass in humiliation. Eleanor had set up a long table under the pergola, draped in white linen. At the head of the table sat Jason holding court with a glass of scotch in one hand and a cigar in the other. Next to him was Tiffany. She was wearing a white sundress that was terrified of a stain, and a sun hat so large it practically had its own zip code. She was laughing at something Jason said, her hand resting possessively on his knee. Jason's father, Robert, was manning the grill flipping steaks with the grim determination of a man who realized too late that his son was an idiot, but was too proud to admit it. And then there was Marcus. Marcus was Jason's brother-in-law, married to Jason's sensible older sister, Diana. Marcus was a corporate attorney, a partner at one of the top firms in the city. He was a black man in a family of old white Connecticut money, and he had earned his place at this table by being smarter, sharper, and harder working than anyone else in the zip code. He sat at the far end of the patio, nursing an iced tea, his eyes scanning the scene with the precision of a hawk. When we walked in, the conversation stopped. "Well, look who decided to show up." Jason announced, his voice booming. "We were just betting on whether your car would make it up the hill." Tiffany giggled. Eleanor stood up, but she didn't come to greet me. She walked straight to Leo. "Hello, darling," she said, reaching for him. Leo flinched and stepped behind me. Eleanor sighed a dramatic exhale that signaled her martyrdom. "Still so sensitive," she muttered. It is a shame. Tiffany was just telling me her nephew is already playing varsity soccer at age 6. I felt a spike of rage, but I swallowed it. Leo is fine. Eleanor, I said, he just doesn't like sudden movements. Tiffany waved from the table. Hi, Sarah, grab a plate. But maybe stay away from the Wagyu. It is $50 a pound. We wouldn't want to waste it if you are not used to the richness. I ignored her and led Leo to a quiet bench near the rose garden. I sat him down with his blocks and turned to face the firing squad. Come sit, Sarah Jason called out. We are celebrating. I walked to the table. There was no chair set for me. Just like at the gala, it was their favorite power move. I will stand, I said. Suit yourself. Jason grinned. He gestured to the sprawling lawn, the pool, the catering staff moving silently in the background. We are celebrating the future, Jason declared. Tiffany has brought such a fresh perspective to the family. She is planning a rebrand of the company. We are going global next quarter. He looked at me, waiting for a reaction. That sounds ambitious, I said flatly. It is visionary, Eleanor corrected me. She reached out and patted Tiffany's hand. Finally, Jason has a partner who matches his energy. Someone young, someone vibrant. No offense, Sarah, but you always drag the mood down with your pragmatism. Pragmatism. That was her word for solvency. That was her word for making sure her son didn't spend his way into prison. I watched them toast. They were so confident. They thought they had won. Jason sat there, the king of the castle, believing he had discarded a dead weight. He didn't realize that the weight he discarded was the anchor that kept his ship from capsizing. Suddenly, Jason turned his attention to Marcus. He needed to assert dominance. It wasn't enough to beat his wife. He had to belittle the other alpha male in the room. Hey, Counselor, Jason shouted down the table. Marcus looked up, his expression unreadable. Yes, Jason. You are awfully quiet today, Jason sneered. Thinking about billable hours. Tell me, how many hours do you have to grind this week to afford a hubcap on the new Porsche I just ordered? Diana, Marcus's wife, looked down at her plate, embarrassed. But Marcus didn't flinch. He took a slow sip of his tea. I am doing just fine, Jason. Fine, Jason laughed. Fine is for losers. I just closed a deal that is worth more than your firm's annual cap. I just acquired 100% of Vantage Marketing. Solo owner. No dead weight. He gestured vaguely in my direction. You chase ambulances, Marcus. I chase millions. That is the difference between an employee and an emperor. The insult hung in the air. It was gross. It was racist. It was pure Jason. Marcus set his glass down. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He just smiled a small, dangerous smile. Congratulations on the acquisition, Jason Marcus said smoothly. Ownership is a heavy responsibility. I hope your shoulders are broad enough. Jason scoffed. Please. I was born for this. The lunch continued. I stood by the pillar invisible, watching the slow-motion train wreck. After an hour, Jason and his father went inside to watch the game. Eleanor took Tiffany to the greenhouse to show off her orchids. I walked back to the bench where Leo was building a tower. Sarah. I turned. Marcus was standing there. He had walked up silently. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the house where Jason was high-fiving his father through the window. Marcus, I said, I am sorry about what he said. Marcus waved a hand. Jason is a child with a loaded gun. I don't let children offend me. He turned to face me. His eyes were dark and serious. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I saw the settlement papers, Sarah. I stiffened. I knew Marcus was good. I didn't know he had seen the documents. Jason emailed them to me last night to brag, Marcus continued. He wanted me to see how he crushed you. Marcus paused, studying my face. He was looking for a crack in the mask. I read them, Sarah. I read every line. You gave him the house. You gave him the cars. You gave him the company. You waived alimony. You even waived your claim to the pension fund. He took a step closer. Sarah, I know you. You are the best CFO I have ever met. You don't make mistakes. But this agreement, it is suicide. You walked away with nothing but a suitcase and a special needs child. Why? He was genuinely concerned. He thought I had given up. He thought I was broken. I looked at Marcus. I respected him. He was the only one in this family who treated Leo like a human being, not a broken toy. I decided to give him a crumb. I didn't walk away with nothing. Marcus, I said softly. Marcus frowned. You got $50,000. That won't last you 6 months in this city. I looked at the house. I looked at the Porsche parked in the driveway. Marcus, I said, in your legal opinion, what happens to a guarantor when the primary asset is transferred, but the debt covenants are not refinanced? Marcus blinked. His lawyer brain engaged instantly. Well, if the debt has a change of control clause, the note becomes callable. Immediately. And what happens, I continued, if the company's operating capital is secured by a personal line of credit from the exiting spouse, and that line is terminated? Marcus's eyes went wide. He looked at the house. He looked at Jason laughing in the window. Then he looked back at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. Liquidity crisis, he whispered. Within days. I nodded. And the tax liabilities, I asked, the ones from 3 years ago that were deferred under the innocent spouse filing. Marcus let out a low breath. He understood. He saw the invisible trapdoors I had built into every paragraph of that settlement. He signed full assumption of liabilities, Marcus realized. He thought he was signing for assets. He took the debt. He took the tax lien. He took the mortgage balloon. He looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. He is legally dead, Sarah. He just hasn't stopped moving yet. I adjusted my purse strap. He wanted everything, Marcus. I just gave him exactly what he asked for. Marcus looked back at the house. The look of concern on his face vanished, replaced by a look of grim satisfaction. He hated Jason's arrogance as much as I did. He turned back to me and held out his glass of iced tea. To the new owner, Marcus said, his voice dripping with irony. I tapped my water bottle against his glass. To the new owner. Just then, Tiffany came skipping out of the greenhouse holding a flower. Sarah, she yelled, your Uber is here. We didn't want you to have to walk down the driveway. It was a dismissal. I picked up Leo. I took Marcus's hand and squeezed it. Don't warn him, I whispered. Marcus smiled, a genuine warm smile. Counselor's honor, he said. I never interrupt an enemy when he is making a mistake. I walked to the waiting car. As I buckled Leo in, I looked back one last time. Jason had come out to the patio. He was kissing Tiffany, surrounded by the wealth he thought he owned. Marcus was standing at the edge of the lawn watching them. He caught my eye and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. I had an ally inside the fortress. I got into the car. The driver asked for the destination. The bank, I said. It was Sunday, but the night drop was open, and I had one final letter to mail to the IRS. The party was over. The hangover was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with the gray, steel-cold precision of a prison sentence. I walked into the lobby of Vantage Marketing for the last time. The security guard, a man named Henry, who I had hired 5 years ago and whose daughter's tuition I had helped pay, couldn't even look me in the eye. He stared at his shoes as he swiped me through the turnstile. The rumor mill had clearly been working overtime over the weekend. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt different today. Usually I spent these 30 seconds reviewing cash flow projections or mentally drafting emails to investors. Today, I stood alone in the mirrored box, adjusting the collar of my blazer, preparing for a performance. I was not the CFO today. I was the victim. And for my plan to work, the victim had to look defeated. When the doors opened, the change was immediate. The reception area, which I had designed with minimalist professionalism, now looked like a chaotic art gallery. There were neon signs leaning against the walls. A massive espresso bar had been installed over the weekend, blocking the fire exit. And there, sitting at the front desk, where my efficient receptionist usually sat, was a massive vase of pink peonies that cost more than the receptionist made in a week. Tiffany's touch. I walked toward the conference room. The glass walls were transparent, a design choice I had made to encourage honesty. Now those glass walls served a different purpose. They allowed me to see the entire staff gathered around the long mahogany table. 50 people. My team, the analysts, the account managers, the creative leads, they all looked terrified. At the head of the table stood Jason. He was wearing a navy suit that was a shade too bright, pacing back and forth like a motivational speaker. Tiffany was perched on the edge of the table next to him, swinging her legs, scrolling through her phone. I opened the door. The room went silent. Jason stopped pacing. He turned to me, a smile spreading across his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, Sarah, you are late." I checked my watch. It was 8:55. "I am 5 minutes early, Jason," I said calmly. Jason waved a hand dismissively. In this new era of Vantage marketing, early is on time and on time is late. But it doesn't matter. Come in. We were just discussing the restructuring. I walked to my usual seat at the right hand of the CEO, but the chair was gone. In its place was a white leather beanbag. Tiffany giggled. "Sorry, Sarah. We are trying to make the energy more fluid. Rigid seating creates rigid thinking." I stood. I placed my briefcase on the floor. I looked at the faces of the employees I had trained. They looked away. They knew what was coming. In corporate America, when the boss brings his mistress to a board meeting, you don't ask questions if you want to keep your health insurance. Jason clapped his hands. "Okay, everyone, listen up. As you know, companies are like sharks. If they stop moving, they die. Vantage has been stagnant. We have been too safe, too focused on spreadsheets and penny pinching." He glanced at me. "That is why effective immediately we are making a leadership change. Sarah will be stepping down as CFO. A murmur went through the room. "The head of accounting." A sharp woman named Linda raised her hand tentatively, but Sir Linda said, her voice shaking. "Sarah handles the bank covenants. She manages the audit relationships. If she leaves right before the quarterly review..." Jason cut her off. "Details, Linda. Those are just details. We can hire a firm to handle the math. What we need right now is vision. We need creativity. We need to shed the dead weight that has been holding us back from the billion-dollar club." He walked over to me. He stood close enough that I could smell the scotch on his breath, likely a remnant from the weekend's celebration. "Sarah," he said, his voice loud enough for the entire room to hear, "we all know you have been struggling. It is hard to be a high-performance executive when you are distracted at home." He turned to the audience, performing his fake empathy. "You all know Sarah has a son with special challenges. Leo requires a lot of attention. And frankly, it is not fair to the company for Sarah to be splitting her focus. She needs to go home. She needs to be a mother." He looked back at me, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Go home and take care of your sick kids, Sarah. Vantage needs fresh blood. We need creative minds like Tiffany who are 100% committed to the future, not bogged down by domestic baggage." The insult landed like a physical slap. He wasn't just firing me. He was using Leo, my beautiful, brilliant son, as the excuse. He was painting me as a charity case, a frazzled housewife who couldn't hack it in the big leagues. I felt the anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. But I remembered the plan. I remembered the document sitting in my briefcase. I forced my face to remain neutral. I lowered my eyes. "You are right, Jason," I said softly. The room exhaled. They had expected a fight. They had expected me to defend my 10-year tenure. My surrender confused them. "Leo does need me," I continued. "And you are right. The company needs a different kind of leadership now." Jason looked triumphant. He looked at Tiffany and winked. "Exactly," he said. "I am glad you are being sensible about this. Security will escort you out, but first you need to hand over the access keys and the files." I reached down and opened my briefcase. I pulled out a thick leather binder. It was heavy. "I prepared this over the weekend," I said. "It contains the transfer of authority. It assigns all signatory powers to you, Jason. It gives you full control over the accounts, the assets, and the strategic direction." I slid the binder across the polished mahogany table. It stopped right in front of him. Jason placed his hand on it. He looked like a child claiming a toy. "Excellent," he said. "There is just one thing I added. Since I am being removed for cause, as you stated, conflict of interest regarding my home life, we need to formalize the separation of assets and liabilities. This binder legally separates me from Vantage Marketing. Once you sign this, I am no longer responsible for any decision, any debt, or any risk associated with this company. It is all you." Jason laughed. He flipped the binder open. He didn't read the text. He didn't check the appendices. He just saw the spaces marked for his signature. "I have been waiting for this day for years," he said. "Total control." He pulled a gold fountain pen from his pocket. "Make sure you sign all 3 copies," I said helpfully. "One for the bank, one for the IRS, and one for your records." Jason signed with a flourish. His signature was large, loopy, and arrogant. He was signing his death warrant, and he was smiling while he did it. What Jason thought he was signing was a standard release of claims. What he was actually signing was a document called a debt assignment and assumption of liability agreement. By signing this, Jason was not just taking control of the company. He was personally assuming every single debt the company held. He was agreeing that if the company could not pay its bills, the creditors could come after his personal assets, his new house, his cars, his future earnings, and crucially buried in paragraph 14 was a clause about the director's loan. Over the years, I had lent the company money from my personal inheritance to cover cash flow gaps. On the books, it was a loan from a shareholder. By signing this, Jason was acknowledging that the company owed me $2 million payable upon demand within 30 days of my termination. He was firing me, and in doing so, he was triggering a $2 million bill that he had to pay me personally. He finished signing. He slammed the binder shut and pushed it back to me. "Done," he said. "Now get out." I took the binder. I checked the signatures. They were perfect. I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. "Goodbye, Jason," I said. "Good luck with the vision." I turned to leave. "Oh, Sarah," Tiffany called out. I stopped at the door. "Leave your company badge on the table," she said. "I need it for the new intern." I unclipped the badge from my blazer. I looked at the plastic card that had identified me as CFO for a decade. I placed it on the table next to the peony vase. "It is all yours, Tiffany," I said. I walked out of the conference room. I walked through the lobby with the neon signs. I walked past Henry, the security guard. "Have a good day, Ms. Sarah," Henry whispered as I passed. "You too, Henry," I said. "You might want to update your resume tonight." I stepped out into the cold morning air. The heavy glass doors of the building closed behind me with a final thud. I took a deep breath. I felt light. I felt clean. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I took a photo of the signed document page. I opened my banking app and navigated to the director's loan section. I hit the button marked Request Repayment. The clock had started. Jason had 30 days to find $2 million in a company that I knew only had $50,000 in the bank. I hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The nail salon," I said. "I think I have time for a manicure." Back in the office, Jason was probably popping champagne. He was probably telling the staff that the dark days of Sarah's budget cuts were over. He was probably promising them bonuses. He didn't know that by the time the champagne got warm, the payroll company would be calling to say the check bounced. The office humiliation was complete. But the real humiliation was just beginning. He had kicked me out of the building, but he had locked himself inside a burning house. And he had just signed a paper promising that he was the only one holding the fire extinguisher. I looked out the window of the taxi as the city blurred by. I wasn't just a scorned wife anymore. I was the priority creditor. And business was about to be very, very good. The office of Sterling, Draper & Vance was designed to intimidate. It was located on the 52nd floor of a Glass Needle in Midtown Manhattan, offering a view that made the cars below look like insects. The conference room was vast, dominated by a table carved from a single slab of black marble. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt less like a climate control setting and more like a preservation technique for the expensive art on the walls. I sat on one side of the table, alone. My hands were folded in my lap. I was wearing a simple gray suit, the kind a schoolteacher might wear. No jewelry, no makeup. I looked small. I looked defeated. On the other side sat Jason and his attorney, Mr. Sterling. Sterling was a man who charged $1,200 an hour to destroy lives. He was 60 years old with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my first car. He was reading the settlement agreement I had drafted. He had been reading it for 20 minutes in absolute silence. Jason was vibrating with impatience. He kept checking his watch, then checking his phone. He was probably texting Tiffany. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Are we done yet?" Sterling Jason snapped. "I have a lunch reservation at Le Bernardin at 1. Mr. Sterling did not look up. He flipped a page. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Mr. Pierce." "Please," Sterling said, his voice like dry paper. "This agreement is unusual." Unusual how Jason asked. She is giving me everything. What is the problem? Sterling took off his reading glasses. He looked at me. His eyes were sharp, intelligent. He was the only person in the room who sensed danger. He had seen thousands of divorces. He knew that people did not just walk away from $10 million in assets without a fight. Mrs. Pierce Sterling said to me, "You are unrepresented today." "I fired my lawyer this morning," I said softly. "He wanted to fight. I do not have the energy to fight anymore." Sterling narrowed his eyes. "You understand that by signing this, you are waiving your right to equitable distribution. You are waiving your right to alimony. You are waiving your right to the marital home, the vacation property, and the business assets." I nodded. "I understand." And in exchange, Sterling continued looking at the paper with suspicion. "You are asking for sole custody of the minor child Leo Pierce with 0 visitation rights for the father, and a one-time cash payment of $50,000. "That is correct," I said. Sterling turned to Jason. "Jason, I have to advise you against signing this today." Jason laughed. It was a loud barking sound. "Are you joking?" Jason asked. "She is handing me the keys to the kingdom. Why would you advise against it because it is too clean?" Sterling said. He tapped the document. "In my 40 years of practice, I have never seen a spouse surrender this much wealth voluntarily. It suggests that there is something we are missing. Perhaps the assets are overvalued. Perhaps there are hidden encumbrances. We need to run a full forensic audit on Vantage Marketing before you accept ownership." I held my breath. Sterling was good. If he ran an audit, he would see the loans. He would see the impending cash flow crisis. Jason slammed his hand on the table. "We don't have time for an audit, Sterling. That will take weeks. I need this done today. Tiffany and I are doing a press release on Monday. I need to be the sole owner on public record." "But the liabilities," Sterling warned. "I know the company better than you do," Jason sneered. "I built it. It is a gold mine. Sarah is just—" He looked at me with a cruel smirk. "She is tired. Look at her. She knows she can't compete with me. She knows she can't run the business. She is doing the only smart thing she has ever done. She is quitting before I crush her in court." Sterling looked at me again. He was trying to solve the puzzle. "Mrs. Pierce, surely you want to reserve some rights for the child's future." I looked down at my hands. I played the part. "I just want peace, Mr. Sterling. Leo needs stability. Fighting Jason. It disrupts Leo's routine." Jason rolled his eyes. "See?" Jason said. "It is always about the kid. She is obsessed." He leaned forward, looking at his lawyer. "Listen to me, Sterling. Sarah is not some mastermind. She is a mother. That is her weakness. She wants the boy. I don't. The boy is—" Jason paused, searching for the word. "He is defective," Jason said. The room went cold. Even Sterling, a man who made a living on cruelty, flinched slightly. "He is a burden," Jason continued, waving his hand. "He screams when the toaster pops. He can't look people in the eye. He is useless to me. If she wants to take that burden off my hands so I can focus on making millions, I say let her have him. It is a fair trade. I get the money, she gets the problem." I felt a sharp pain in my palms. I realized I was digging my fingernails into my skin. He called our son a defect. He called our son a problem. That was the final confirmation. I felt the last drop of guilt evaporate. I wasn't destroying a husband. I was removing a cancer. I looked up. I looked straight at Jason. "Give me the pen," I said. Jason grinned. He nudged Sterling. "Give her the pen." Sterling hesitated. He looked at the document one last time. He scanned the clauses about debt assumption. "Jason," he said quietly. Paragraph 14. "You are assuming all personal and corporate liabilities. If there are debts you don't know about—" "I know about every debt," Jason shouted. "I am the CEO. Stop trying to bill me for extra hours, Sterling. I am ordering you to let her sign." Sterling sighed. He was expensive, but he was still a service provider. The client is always right, even when the client is walking off a cliff. He slid the heavy black fountain pen across the marble table. I picked it up. The weight of it felt good. I turned to the last page. I signed my name. Sarah Pierce. The letters were neat and steady. I pushed the document to Jason. "Your turn," I said. Jason grabbed the pen. He didn't even look at the page. He slashed his signature across the line. Jason Pierce. He dropped the pen. He leaned back in his leather chair, interlocking his fingers behind his head. "Done," he declared. Sterling pulled the document away. He notarized it with a heavy stamp. Thump, thump. The sound was like a gavel. Judgment delivered. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a heavy key ring. It held the fob to the penthouse, the key to the Hamptons estate, and the key to the Porsche Panamera. I placed them on the marble table. They made a harsh metallic sound. Then I pulled out a small black USB drive. This contains the admin passwords for the Vantage marketing bank accounts, the payroll system, and the client database, I said. I slid the keys and the USB drive across the table. They slid smoothly over the polished stone, stopping right in front of Jason. He picked up the Porsche key. He tossed it in the air and caught it. "Beautiful," he said. Sterling was packing up his briefcase. He looked at me with a strange expression. It wasn't pity anymore. It was curiosity. He knew he had missed something, but it was too late now, Mrs. Pierce Sterling said. "Since the transfer is immediate, you will need to vacate the premises." "I am already out," I said. Jason stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at me like I was an employee he had just fired. "Well, Sarah," he said, "I would say it has been nice, but we both know that would be a lie." He checked his reflection in the glass window. "Make sure you keep the kid away from the city," he added. "I don't want him running into me or Tiffany. It would be awkward." I stood up. I picked up my purse. I looked at this man, this hollow, shiny shell of a human being. He had everything he wanted. The title, the toys, the freedom. He had no idea that the USB drive he was holding was the trigger for a nuclear financial winter. He had no idea that the admin access I gave him was to accounts that were already flagged for liquidation. I walked to the door. My hand rested on the brass handle. I turned back. Jason was already typing on his phone, probably texting Tiffany that the deal was done. "Congratulations, CEO," I said. My voice was clear. It cut through the room. Jason looked up, surprised by the tone. It wasn't the voice of a defeated woman. It was the voice of a judge. "It is all yours," I said. I opened the door and walked out. The reception area was quiet. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, I saw Mr. Sterling standing in the hallway of his office. He was watching me leave. He frowned. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. I saw his lips move. "Get me the credit report on Vantage Marketing. Now." I smiled as the doors shut. "Too late, Mr. Sterling. The ink is dry." I rode the elevator down 52 floors. My ears popped. With every floor, I felt lighter. I walked out of the building and into the busy street. The noise of the city rushed over me. Sirens, horns, people shouting. It was beautiful. I checked my watch. It was 12:45 p.m. Jason would be at Le Bernardin in 15 minutes. He would order the most expensive bottle of wine. He would toast to his genius. At 2:00 p.m., the bank servers would update. The notifications would start. I hailed a cab. "Where to?" Lady the driver asked. "A playground," I said. "Any playground. I wanted to watch my son play. I wanted to see him smile. Jason had called him useless. But Jason was wrong. Leo wasn't useless. Leo was the reason. Leo was the motivation. And thanks to Jason's greed, Leo was now the safest child in New York. I looked at the skyscrapers around me. Somewhere up there, a man was laughing. "Laugh while you can, Jason. The bill is coming, and you just signed for the whole tab." That night, while I was assembling a second-hand bookshelf in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, my phone began to vibrate. It did not stop. It buzzed against the cheap laminate flooring like an angry hornet. I ignored it for the first 10 minutes, focusing on the instructions for the shelf. Leo was already asleep in the next room, his white noise machine humming softly. When the buzzing persisted, I finally picked it up. I had 40 notifications, all from Instagram, all tagging me. I opened the app. At the top of my feed was a live video. The red banner blinked, live. The user was Tiffany_Banks_official. I should have turned it off. I should have blocked her, but I am a forensic accountant. I do not look away from evidence. I study it. I clicked the video. The screen filled with the interior of the penthouse I had left that morning, but the lighting was different. Strobe lights were flashing in blue and purple. The music was deafening, a heavy bass track that rattled the speakers of my phone. Tiffany was holding the camera selfie style. She was wearing a silver sequin dress that looked like disco ball shrapnel. She was screaming over the music. "Hey guys, welcome to the new HQ. We are celebrating big tonight." She spun the camera around. The living room was packed. There were at least 100 people. I recognized some of them, junior analysts from the office who were desperate for a promotion, friends of Jason who had never liked me because I didn't let them smoke cigars in the house, and a lot of strangers, the kind of hangers-on who smell money and free alcohol from 3 blocks away. Tiffany walked through the crowd holding a magnum of champagne. "Look at this view," she shrieked, pointing the camera at the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Manhattan skyline glittered behind her. "That is my city now, baby." She grabbed Jason, who was standing on the coffee table. My coffee table pouring vodka into the mouth of a laughing girl. He looked sweaty. He looked manic. He looked like a man who had just conquered the world. "Tell them, baby," Tiffany yelled. "Tell them who owns this town." Jason looked into the camera. His eyes were glassy. "Vantage marketing," he roared. "We are just getting started. Out with the old, in with the gold." The crowd cheered. Jason jumped down from the table and grabbed Tiffany. He kissed her sloppy and wet for the camera. "We are going to the garage," Tiffany announced to her viewers. "You guys have to see the new toys." The camera shook as she ran to the elevator. The signal cut out for a second as they went down, then reconnected in the garage. Jason ran over to the Porsche Panamera. He slapped the hood. "Mine," he yelled. Then he ran to the Range Rover. "Mine." Then he pointed to a brand new bright yellow Lamborghini that I had never seen before. It still had the dealer ribbon on the dashboard. "And this," Jason said, wrapping his arm around Tiffany, "is a little signing bonus for me. Because when you are the CEO, you drive like a CEO." The comments section on the live stream was scrolling so fast it was a blur. "Goals. Power couple. Sarah, who you guys are legends." I watched them get into the Lamborghini. Jason revved the engine. The sound echoed in the concrete garage, a guttural roar of horsepower and waste. I watched for another minute. I watched them laugh. I watched them mock the life I had built. I watched them celebrate the theft of my home, my car, and my dignity. To the 5,000 people watching that stream, I was the loser. I was the discarded first wife sitting in a sad little apartment while the victors drank Dom Perignon. I closed the app. I set the phone down on the floor. I looked around my new living room. It was small. The walls were painted a generic beige. The view out the window was of a brick wall and a fire escape. The air smelled slightly of old radiators and city dust. It was humble. It was quiet. And it was completely 100% paid for. I had rented this place under my maiden name 2 weeks ago, using cash I had saved from my consulting fees. The lease was for 6 months. The fridge was stocked with Leo's favorite foods. The internet was high speed. I walked into Leo's room. He was sleeping soundly, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. He didn't miss the penthouse. He didn't miss the view. He didn't miss the tension that had suffocated our home for years. He was safe. I went back to the living room and picked up my laptop. I logged into the back end of the bank that held the mortgage on the penthouse. I wasn't the guarantor anymore, so I couldn't make changes. But because I had built the notification system for the bank's VIP portal years ago as a freelancer, I knew exactly how to track the status of a loan without logging in. I just had to check the public lien registry, which updated every night at midnight. I refreshed the page. There it was, a small red flag next to the property address. Status guarantor removed. Condition breach of covenant. Action accelerated payment demand. Sent. The letter was already in the mail. I switched tabs. I checked the credit card processor for Vantage Marketing. Transaction volume high. Merchant category luxury goods, liquor, automotive. Current balance $48,000. Available credit $2,000. Jason had burned through almost the entire limit in one night. He bought a Lamborghini on a corporate line of credit that was linked to a revenue stream that no longer existed. I closed the laptop. On the screen of my mind, I could still see them dancing. I could see Tiffany spinning in the closet, throwing my old clothes onto the floor. I could see Jason revving the engine. They were celebrating a victory, but it was a fake victory. It was a mirage. They were like children who had found a credit card on the sidewalk and thought they were rich. They didn't understand that the bill doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. They didn't understand that ownership is not just about holding the keys. It is about holding the liability. Jason thought he had taken my life. In reality, he had just stepped into my shoes. And he had no idea that those shoes were made of concrete and he was standing in the middle of the ocean. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea, chamomile, cheap tea bags from the corner store. I took a sip. It tasted better than any vintage wine I had ever drunk with Jason. The world thought I had lost. My friends, the fake ones, were probably pitying me right now. They were probably whispering about how sad it was that Sarah let herself get pushed out, how tragic that she ended up with nothing. Let them think that. Let them enjoy the show. Because the best part of a magic trick is the turn. The moment when the audience realizes they were looking at the wrong hand. I finished my tea. I turned off the light. As I lay in my narrow bed staring at the cracked ceiling, I didn't feel anger. I felt a deep, cold satisfaction. Jason was revving his engine, but I knew something he didn't. I had cut the brake lines 3 days ago. Sleep well, CEO, I whispered into the darkness. Tomorrow the hangover begins, and it is going to be expensive. People often ask me how I can sleep at night, knowing I destroyed the father of my child. They ask if I feel guilty about leaving him with nothing. They look at the surface of the situation, and they see a vindictive ex-wife who pulled the rug out from under a successful man. But they are looking at the wrong ledger. I did not destroy Jason. I simply stopped saving him. I did not pull the rug out. I just stopped holding up the floor. To understand what is about to happen to Jason, you have to understand the difference between wealth and debt. Jason looks at the world like a consumer. He sees a penthouse and thinks he is rich. He sees a Lamborghini and thinks he is powerful. He sees a company with 50 employees and thinks he is a king. I look at the world like a forensic accountant. I do not see objects. I see covenants. I see liabilities. I see the fine print that holds the physical world together. And for the last 5 years, the only thing holding Jason's world together was me. Let me walk you through the 3 pillars of his destruction. These were not traps I set out of malice. These were financial structures I built to keep his reckless spending from bankrupting us years ago. But when he forced me out, those safety nets turned into snares. First, let us talk about the penthouse, the crown jewel of his victory, the apartment on Park Avenue with the view of the skyline. Jason thinks he owns it because his name is on the deed. He thinks he won a $6 million asset, but he did not check the mortgage documents. He did not check the lien history. 2 years ago, Vantage Marketing was in trouble. Jason had spent too much on a failed expansion into Asia. We needed cash and we needed it fast. The banks would not lend to the company because the ratios were too weak. So I did what any good CFO would do to save the family business. I leveraged our personal assets. I took out a second mortgage on the penthouse. It was a specialized financial product called a balloon mortgage. It gave us $2 million in cash immediately with very low monthly payments for 24 months. But there was a catch, a massive catch. At the end of the 24 months, the entire principal balance of $2 million would come due in one single payment. That is the balloon. When did we sign that document? Exactly 23 months ago. Jason was at the closing, but he was too busy flirting with the notary to read the amortization schedule. He just asked me where to sign to get the money. I tried to explain it to him. I told him we had 2 years to pay this back. He laughed and said that in 2 years we would be billionaires. He spent the money. I managed the debt. But there is another clause in that mortgage agreement. Clause 17B. The change of guarantor clause. The loan was underwritten based on my credit score and my income. The bank knew I was the one paying the bills. The contract states clearly that if I am removed from the title or if I am no longer a resident of the property, the bank has the right to accelerate the loan. That means they do not have to wait for the 24th month. They can demand the full $2 million immediately. By kicking me out of the house and by removing my name from the title to claim sole ownership, Jason triggered Clause 17B. He sent a signal to the bank that the credit-worthy borrower had left the building. The bank computers are automated. They do not care about his ego. They only care about risk. When the system updated at midnight, it flagged the property as high risk. The demand letter is already generated. Jason has 30 days to write a check for $2 million. If he does not, the bank forecloses. He will lose the house, and because the market has softened, the sale won't cover the debt. He will be homeless, and he will still owe money. He thinks he won a palace. He actually won an eviction notice. Now let us look at the second trap, the company, Vantage Marketing. Jason believes that clients buy the brand. He believes they buy the logo, the fancy office, and his charming smile. He is wrong. In the high-stakes world of crisis management and strategic consulting, clients buy competence. They buy the person who answers the phone at 3 a.m. when the scandal breaks. For 10 years, that person was me. Jason was the face. I was the brain. And our biggest clients knew it. Take our largest account, the Henderson Group. They represent 40% of Vantage Marketing's annual revenue. Without them, the company cannot make payroll. Mr. Henderson is a shark. He hates Jason. He thinks Jason is a lightweight. 3 years ago, Mr. Henderson tried to fire us. I saved the account. I flew to Chicago and sat in his office for 6 hours. I restructured his entire compliance strategy. At the end of that meeting, Mr. Henderson agreed to renew the contract, but he had one condition. He did not trust Jason. He insisted on a key person clause. This is a standard clause in professional services contracts, but Jason never reads contracts. He just looks at the signature page. The clause states specifically that the agreement is between the Henderson Group and Vantage Marketing Contingent upon the direct active involvement of Sarah Pierce. It says in black and white that if Sarah Pierce ceases to be the lead consultant on the account for any reason, including termination or resignation, the contract is automatically voided. Not suspended, voided. When Jason announced to the staff that I was leaving, he probably thought he was showing strength. He did not know he was announcing the death of his company. The moment my employment status changed in the HR system, an automated notification went to the Henderson legal team. I set that automation up myself to ensure transparency. Mr. Henderson does not do second chances. When he sees I am gone, he will pull the plug. That is 40% of the revenue gone overnight. But the expenses remain: the rent on the fancy office, the salaries of the 50 employees, the lease on the new copy machines. The burn rate of the company is $300,000 a month. With the Henderson money gone, the income is only $180,000. Do the math. Jason will be losing $120,000 every single month. And remember, he just signed a document personally guaranteeing all company debts. He cannot just close the doors and walk away. He has to pay the rent out of his own pocket. He has to pay the severance packages out of his own pocket. He locked himself inside a burning building and threw away the key. And finally, the third trap, the most dangerous one of all. The IRS. Jason loves to brag about how little tax we pay. He tells his friends at the country club that he has a brilliant tax strategy. He does not have a strategy. He has a deferral. For the last 3 years as the company grew, we generated significant profits on paper. But cash flow was always tight because Jason kept buying things. To avoid a liquidity crisis, I utilized a legal tax deferral strategy. We filed for extensions. We set up payment plans. We pushed the liability into the future, betting on future growth to pay the past bills. This is legal if you manage it correctly, but it means there is a mountain of unpaid taxes sitting in the background. It is a dormant volcano. The total amount of deferred federal and state taxes for the last 3 years is roughly $450,000. Usually in a marriage, this debt is shared. If the IRS comes calling, they come for both spouses. But there is a way out. It is called innocent spouse relief, or more specifically, the allocation of liability. When we sat in that conference room with the lawyers, I insisted on a specific document: the debt assignment and assumption of liability agreement. Jason's lawyer, Mr. Sterling, warned him. He told him to check the liabilities. But Jason was too arrogant. He was too eager to get me out of his life so he could bring Tiffany in. He wanted a clean break. He got a clean break, all right. He broke himself. By signing that document, Jason formally agreed to assume 100% of the tax liability for the joint filing years. He legally absolved me of the debt. He told the federal government in writing that the tax bill was his and his alone. I have already mailed a copy of that agreement to the IRS, along with Form 8857. I am now clear. I do not owe a penny. Jason, however, now owes the IRS nearly $500,000. And unlike banks, the IRS does not negotiate. They do not care if you're having a bad month. They do not care if your biggest client just fired you. They have the power to freeze assets without a court order. They can garnish wages. They can seize property. So let us look at the full picture. In 30 days, the bank will ask for $2 million for the house. In 3 days, the Henderson Group will pull 40% of the revenue, putting the company in the red by 6 figures a month. In 60 days, the IRS will process the paperwork and demand $450,000 in back taxes. Jason has maybe $50,000 in cash in the bank. He has a Lamborghini that depreciated 20% the moment he drove it off the lot. He has a mistress who thinks he is a billionaire, and he has a personality that prevents him from asking for help. He thinks I walked away with nothing. I walked away with my freedom, my son, and my future. He stayed behind with a time bomb strapped to his chest. The mechanism of revenge is not always a shout. Sometimes it is just the quiet clicking of a clock. I am not a cruel woman. I tried to warn him for years. I told him we were spending too much. I told him we needed to pay down debt. I told him that appearance is not reality. He told me I was boring. He told me I had no vision. He told me to stop worrying and let him be the man. So I did. I let him be the man. I let him be the man who owes everyone money. I can imagine him right now. He's probably waking up in the master bedroom with the Egyptian cotton sheets. He is looking out at the city. He feels like a master of the universe. He is planning his day, maybe a lunch with investors, maybe a shopping trip with Tiffany. He does not know that the ground beneath his feet is already gone. He is Wile E. Coyote, who has run off the cliff but has not looked down yet. And I am just the roadrunner. Beep, beep. The beauty of this plan is that I do not have to lift a finger anymore. The contracts are signed. The emails are sent. The automation is running. I can turn off my phone. I can take my son to the park. I can breathe. The legal system in this country is designed to protect contracts. It is cold. It is rigid. It does not care about feelings. Jason used to love that. He used to say that business is just survival of the fittest. He used to say that if you are not smart enough to read the fine print, you deserve to lose. I agree with him. I agree completely. He signed the papers. He wanted the assets. He got them. He just forgot that every asset has a shadow, and that shadow is called risk. I lived in the shadow for 10 years, keeping the monsters at bay. Now I have stepped into the light, and I have left him in the dark with the things he refused to see. This is not revenge. This is accounting. It is the balancing of the books. For every action, there is a reaction. For every debit, there is a credit. Jason took all the credits. It is only fair that he takes the debits too. I look at Leo sleeping in his new room. He is peaceful. He doesn't know that his father traded him for a bankruptcy filing, and he never needs to know. I will build a new life for us, a life built on real numbers, not inflated projections. As for Jason, he is about to learn a very expensive lesson in forensic accounting. Lesson number 1, read the documents. Lesson number 2, never underestimate the person who manages your money. Lesson number 3, when you take everything, you take everything, including the fall. The countdown has begun. 30 days. That is all he has. 30 days of fake paradise before the reality check arrives. And when it does, it will not bounce. It will clear, and it will take everything he has left. I close my laptop. The screen goes black. I see my own reflection. I look tired, but I look strong. I am not the victim of this divorce. I am the architect. The 31st day broke with a sky so blue it looked painted. For me, it was just a Tuesday. I made Leo his oatmeal, checked his backpack for his sensory toys, and drove him to his new school. We sang along to the radio. The air felt lighter. My shoulders, which had carried the weight of a failing marriage and a precarious company for a decade, finally felt relaxed. For Jason, however, the 31st day was not a Tuesday. It was the expiration date. I was not there to see it, but I know exactly how it happened. I know because I know the systems. I know the banking algorithms. And I know Jason. He would have arrived at the office around 10. He likely walked past the empty reception desk where the peonies were already wilting because no one had remembered to water them. He would have gone straight to his office, sat in his ergonomic leather chair, and put his feet up on the desk. He probably felt like a king. He had survived the first month. The sky hadn't fallen, the lights were still on, but the mail was sitting on his desk. Among the pile of magazines and junk mail, there was a single envelope that stood out. It was thick, it was white, and it had a red stamp on the front that said, "Certified Mail." Jason hates certified mail. He usually throws it in a drawer for me to deal with, but I wasn't there. He probably picked it up annoyed. He probably used his gold letter opener to slice it open thinking it was a contract or a check. It was neither. It was a demand for full payment and notice of acceleration from the Global Trust Bank. I can imagine him reading the first line. "We are writing to inform you that due to a breach of covenant regarding the property at 450 Park Avenue, the full principal balance of $2,140,000 is now due and payable immediately." He would have laughed first. He would have thought it was a prank, a clerical error. He probably picked up his office phone and dialed the number at the bottom of the letter, ready to scream at some low-level customer service representative. He would have demanded to speak to a manager. He would have shouted, "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO of Vantage Marketing. I own that penthouse." And the manager, looking at a screen filled with red flags, would have replied calmly, "Yes, Mr. Pierce, we see that you are the sole owner on the deed as of 30 days ago. That is the problem." Jason would have paused. The problem. The loan was underwritten with Sarah Pierce as the primary guarantor, the manager would have explained. The terms of the second mortgage explicitly state that if the primary guarantor is removed from the title, the risk profile changes. The bank does not extend unsecured credit of this magnitude to an individual with your current debt-to-income ratio. Therefore, the removal of Mrs. Pierce triggered the acceleration clause. You have 48 hours to wire the full balance, or we will initiate foreclosure proceedings. Jason would have dropped the phone. $2 million. He didn't have $2 million. He didn't even have 200,000. He would have sat there, the silence of the room pressing in on him. He would have looked at the view of the skyline, the view he bragged about on the live stream, and realized he was looking at it for the last time. But the universe wasn't done with him yet. The first domino had hit the second. Just as the blood was draining from his face, his cell phone rang. It was Tiffany. Jason probably answered it, desperate for a distraction. He needed to hear a friendly voice. He needed his cheerleader. He didn't get a cheerleader. He got a banshee. Tiffany screamed. Her voice was so loud, he probably had to pull the phone away from his ear. "I am standing at the counter at Gucci. There are people everywhere." "What?" Jason would have stammered, his brain still reeling from the bank letter. "What is wrong?" "The card." Tiffany shrieked. "The black card I tried to buy the limited edition handbag, the one you promised me for surviving the move, and the machine made this horrible noise." Jason rubbed his temples. "Babe, maybe the chip is dirty. Try it again." "I tried it 3 times, Tiffany yelled. The manager came over. He cut the card. Jason, he cut it in half with scissors right in front of everyone. He said the account has been flagged for liquidation. Liquidation. The word hung in the air like smoke. Jason hung up on her. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't apologize. He scrambled to his computer. He logged into the corporate banking portal. His hands were shaking so badly, he likely mistyped his password twice. When the dashboard finally loaded, he saw the red numbers. Operating account negative $4,000. Payroll account 0. Line of credit revoked. He clicked on the transaction history. He saw the auto debits that had gone through that morning. The lease for the office, the lease for the Lamborghini, the insurance premiums. And then he saw the big one. Transfer to director loan repayment $2 million. Status failed. Insufficient funds. He stared at the screen. He realized what had happened. I had called in my loan. The system had tried to pay me. It drained every penny that was available and then crashed the account into the negative. The company was dead. It wasn't just broke. It was insolvent. Jason stood up. His chair fell backward with a crash. He was hyperventilating. The walls of the glass office felt like they were closing in. He looked at the door, expecting someone to come in and fix it. He expected me to walk in with a binder and a plan. He expected me to say, "Don't worry, Jason. I moved some money around. I fixed it." But the door remained closed. He grabbed his phone. He scrolled through his contacts. He found the name he had deleted but had not blocked. Sarah. He hit dial. I was sitting on a park bench in Queens, watching Leo go down the slide. He was laughing. It was a pure, uninhibited sound that I hadn't heard in years. My phone buzzed in my purse. I took it out. I saw the name. Jason. I looked at the phone. I didn't feel a spike of adrenaline. I didn't feel fear. I felt a cool, detached curiosity. I let it ring. It rang 4 times. Then it went to voicemail. I imagined him in his office, sweat dripping down his forehead, listening to my cheerful recorded greeting. "Hi, you have reached Sarah. I am currently unavailable. Please leave a message." He called again immediately. I silenced the ringer. I watched Leo climb the ladder again. He was getting stronger. He was confident. My phone buzzed a 3rd time, then a 4th. Finally, a notification appeared. New voicemail. I put one earbud in. I pressed play. Sarah Jason's voice was unrecognizable. It was high-pitched, frantic, bordering on hysterical. "Sarah, pick up the phone. There is a mistake. The bank sent a letter. They want the money for the house, and the accounts are locked. Tiffany is stuck at Gucci. You have to fix this. Call the bank. Tell them you are still the guarantor. Tell them it was a mistake." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing heavily. "Sarah, please. You can't do this. We have a deal. I am the CEO. You can't just turn off the money." The message ended. I deleted it. I didn't smile. This wasn't funny. It was tragic. It was the sound of a man who had lived his entire life in a nursery, believing that food just appeared on the table and lights just stayed on. He had never seen the power plant. He had never seen the slaughterhouse. He thought civilization was magic. He was learning that civilization is maintenance, and he had fired the maintenance crew. I looked at the timestamp on the voicemail, 10:45 a.m. The bank would be calling his office line any minute now to discuss the surrender of the property. The leasing company for the Lamborghini would be getting the notification of the bounced payment by noon. And Tiffany. She was probably standing on 5th Avenue holding the pieces of a cut-up credit card, realizing that her sugar daddy was actually diabetic and out of insulin. I put my phone back into my purse. Leo ran over to me, his face flushed with excitement. "Mommy, did you see?" I went down the big slide. I hugged him. I smelled the fresh air and the scent of pine needles on his jacket. "I saw baby," I said. "You were so brave." "Who is calling you?" Leo asked, pointing at my purse. "No one important," I said. "Just a telemarketer. Someone trying to sell something we don't need anymore." We walked to the car. I had a meeting at 1 p.m. with a new client, a startup founder who needed a CFO to help him scale sustainably. He respected my resume. He didn't care about my address. As I drove away from the park, I thought about Jason one last time. He was alone in that office. For the first time in his life, he was truly, completely alone. He had the title, he had the chair, he had the view, but he didn't have the code to the safe. He had 30 days to find $2 million. But honestly, I knew he wouldn't last the week. The bank letter was just the opening shot. The real artillery was still moving into position. I turned up the radio. A pop song was playing. It sounded like victory. I wondered if he would try to go home tonight. I wondered if he realized that the key fob in his pocket was already deactivated. The bank moves fast when the loan is accelerated. They secure the asset. He would be locked out. He would have to call a locksmith. But he couldn't pay the locksmith because his credit cards were dead. It was a perfect circle of consequence. I stopped at a red light. I looked in the rearview mirror. My eyes were bright. My skin looked clear. The stress lines that had defined my face for years were fading. 31 days. It took God 7 days to create the world. It took Jason 31 days to lose his. The light turned green. I drove forward, leaving the past in the rearview mirror shrinking with every mile. The collapse had begun, and the silence from my end was the loudest sound Jason would ever hear. If the bank letter was the earthquake, what happened next was the tsunami. It did not happen all at once. It happened in waves, each one crashing harder than the last, eroding the foundation of the empire Jason thought he controlled. I was sitting in the reception area of a modest office building in Midtown, waiting for my meeting with the startup founder. I had my tablet open, monitoring the public server traffic for Vantage marketing. I couldn't see the emails, but I could see the volume. The inbound traffic had spiked 400% in the last hour. In the industry, we call this the exodus. Back at the penthouse office, Jason was likely still staring at the letter from the bank, trying to process the concept of a $2 million demand, when his assistant, a young woman named Jessica, who was terrified of him, knocked on the glass door. She didn't wait for permission to enter. She opened the door, her face pale. "Mr. Pierce," she stammered. "I have Mr. Henderson on line 1. He says it is urgent." Jason probably exhaled in relief. Henderson, the whale, the client who paid 40% of the bills. Jason probably thought he could smooth things over. He probably thought he could ask Henderson for an advance on the next quarter's fees to cover the mortgage crisis. He adjusted his tie. He put on his CEO voice, put him through Jessica. Jason picked up the phone. "Mr. Henderson," Jason boomed, trying to sound jovial. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "We were just talking about your Q3 strategy." He didn't get to finish the sentence. Jason Henderson's voice would have been like grinding metal. "I just received an automated notification from your HR system. It says Sarah Pierce has been terminated. Is this accurate?" Jason laughed nervously. It was a reflex. "Well, terminated is a strong word, Mr. Henderson. Sarah and I have decided to part ways professionally. We are moving in a new direction, a bolder direction. I have appointed a new creative director who—" "I don't care about your creative director," Henderson cut him off. "I don't care about your direction. My contract with Vantage Marketing has a key person clause. Clause 8, Section C. Do you know what that says?" "Jason?" Jason froze. He didn't know. He never read the contracts. It says, Henderson continued, his voice dropping an octave, that my retainer is contingent upon the direct oversight of Sarah Pierce. I hired her brain, Jason. I hired her risk assessment. I didn't hire you. You are a front man. You are the guy who buys the drinks. Sarah was the one who kept my company out of federal court last year. Mr. Henderson, please. Jason pleaded, the sweat starting to bead on his forehead. I assure you I can handle the account. I built this company. You didn't build anything, Henderson snapped. You just stood on the stage while she pulled the ropes. I am exercising my right to terminate immediately. My legal team has already drafted the notice. Do not bill us for this month. If you try, I will countersue you for breach of contract. The line went dead. Jason held the phone to his ear for a long time, listening to the dial tone. 40% of the revenue, gone. In 30 seconds. He didn't have time to process it. The line lit up again. Line 2. It was the VP of Operations for TechFlow, the second largest client. Jason picked up. Hey, Mike. Good to hear from... Jason cut the crap, Mike said. We just heard Sarah is out. We are out too. We are following her. Wait, Jason shouted, standing up. She can't do that. She has a non-compete. She didn't call us, Mike said calmly. We called her. And guess what? She didn't pick up. But we are not staying with a firm that fires its only competent executive to promote a 24-year-old fashion blogger. Good luck, Jason. Send us the final invoice. Click. Line 3. Line 4. Line 5. The phone board looked like a Christmas tree on fire. Every light was blinking red. Jason looked out through the glass walls of his office. The main floor was in chaos. Staff members were on their phones looking frantic. They were hearing the same thing from their contacts. The account managers were trying to calm clients down, but they had no answers. They looked to Jason for leadership, and all they saw was a man melting down in a designer suit. Then Tiffany walked in. She was holding the pieces of her credit card. She had tears streaming down her face, ruining her spray tan. "Jason," she wailed, ignoring the blinking phones. "You have to fix this." The woman at Gucci laughed at me. She said I was declined. It was so embarrassing. Jason looked at her. For the first time, he didn't see a trophy. He saw a liability. "Not now." "Tiffany," he roared. Tiffany stopped crying. She looked shocked. He had never raised his voice at her. "Don't yell at me," she screamed back. "I am the victim here. I need that bag for the launch party tonight. There is no launch party." Jason slammed his fist on the desk. "The Henderson account just quit TechFlow, just quit. They are all quitting." Tiffany blinked. Her eyes were wide and vacant. So she asked, "We will get new clients. Cooler clients." Those old guys were boring anyway. Jason stared at her. He realized with a sinking horror that she actually believed that. She thought business was just about posting pictures and being cool. She didn't understand that clients like Henderson paid the rent. She didn't understand that without those boring old guys, there was no money for Gucci bags, no money for the penthouse, no money for the payroll. Payroll. The thought hit him like a physical blow. He picked up the phone and dialed the internal extension for accounting. Linda answered on the first ring. She sounded like she had been crying. Linda Jason barked, "What is our current cash position?" There was a silence on the other end. "Mr. Pierce?" Linda whispered, "I tried to process the payroll batch for Friday. It was rejected." "Rejected?" Jason asked, his voice trembling. "Why, insufficient funds," Linda said. "The operating account is overdrawn. The line of credit is closed." "And?" "Sir." "What?" Jason snapped. "I see a pending debit for $2 million to a Sarah Pierce," Linda said. "It failed, but the bank charged us an overdraft fee for the attempt. We are negative $4,000. Jason dropped into his chair. He looked around the office. He saw the 50 employees working outside. They were working hard. They were expecting paychecks on Friday. They had mortgages. They had kids. He had signed a personal guarantee for their salaries. If he couldn't pay them, the Department of Labor would come after him personally. He looked at the furniture, the Herman Miller chairs, the marble tables, the custom artwork. He realized he didn't own a company. He owned a museum of bad decisions. Vantage Marketing wasn't an asset. It was a hollow shell. It was a monster with a mouth that cost $300,000 a month to feed, and the food supply had just been cut off. He looked at Tiffany, who was now sitting on the sofa, sulking and texting her friends. She was a cost. The office was a cost. The staff was a cost. The only thing that had ever generated profit was the woman he had kicked out yesterday. The phone rang again. Jason looked at the caller ID. It wasn't a client this time. It was the landlord of the building. "Mr. Pierce," the landlord's voice was cold. "We just received a notice that the automatic rent payment was returned. This is a breach of your lease. You have 24 hours to cure the default, or we will lock the elevators." Jason hung up without saying a word. He stood up and walked to the window. He looked down at the street 50 stories below. The cars looked like toys. The people looked like ants. He felt dizzy. The room was spinning. He had wanted to be the sole owner. He had wanted all the glory. Now he had it. He owned every single problem. He owned every single debt. He owned every single failure. He turned to look at the desk where the contract lay, the one he had signed so arrogantly just 24 hours ago. The debt assignment agreement. He remembered my words. "Congratulations, CEO. It is all yours." He realized now what I had meant. I hadn't given him a gift. I had handed him a grenade with the pin pulled out, and he had been too busy looking in the mirror to notice the ticking sound. Tiffany looked up from her phone. "Jason, this is boring," she whined. "Can we just go to lunch? I want sushi." Jason looked at her. He looked at the woman he had destroyed his family for. "We can't go to lunch, Tiffany," he said, his voice sounding dead and hollow. "Why not?" she asked petulantly, because Jason whispered, realizing the absolute terrifying truth of it. "I don't have enough money to buy a tuna roll." He sank to the floor. He put his head in his hands. Outside, the phones kept ringing. A chorus of cancellations, a symphony of rejection. But nobody picked up. There was nobody left to answer. The brain of the operation was sitting in a park in Queens eating a sandwich and watching the clouds go by. The body was still there, twitching in the expensive suit, but the life was gone. Vantage Marketing had officially flatlined, and the doctor had left the building. The war room was not located at the Pentagon. It was located in the drawing room of the Greenwich estate under a crystal chandelier that had witnessed 3 generations of Pierce family scandals. But this scandal was different. This one did not have a solution that could be written on a check. I was not there physically, but Marcus recorded the entire conversation on his phone. He sent it to me later that night with a simple caption that read, "Justice served cold." I have listened to that recording so many times. I can hear the ice clinking in Jason's glass and the frantic rustle of silk as Tiffany crossed and uncrossed her legs. The meeting had been called by Eleanor, Jason's mother. She was pacing the Persian rug, clutching a martini glass like a weapon. Jason was slumped in a wingback chair, looking like a man who had gone 12 rounds with a heavyweight boxer. Tiffany was sitting on the ottoman, filing her nails, looking bored and annoyed that her credit card was still dead. And Marcus sat by the fireplace, a leather briefcase on his lap, watching the circus with the patience of a saint. "She is a thief," Eleanor shrieked. Her voice cracked the air. "She stole your company, Jason. She stole your inheritance. She is a con artist. I knew it from the day you married her. I told you she was too quiet. It is always the quiet ones who are plotting." Jason rubbed his face with his hands. "She didn't steal it, Mom." Jason groaned. "She tricked me. She set me up. She knew the accounts were empty. She knew about the mortgage clause. It was entrapment." Entrapment, Eleanor seized on the word. "Exactly. That is illegal, isn't it, Marcus?" She turned to her son-in-law. She looked at Marcus, not as a family member, but as a hired gun she could point at her enemies. "Marcus, you are a lawyer," Eleanor commanded. "You need to fix this. We are going to sue her. We are going to sue her for fraud, for embezzlement, for emotional distress. I want you to draft the papers tonight. I want her in jail, Marcus. I want her in handcuffs before the country club brunch on Sunday." Tiffany looked up. "Yeah, and sue her for my bag too," she added. "That Gucci bag was a limited edition. It was practically an investment." Marcus did not move. He did not open his laptop. He did not pull out a notepad. He just sat there looking at the family that had treated him like an outsider for 15 years. "I cannot sue her," Eleanor, Marcus said. His voice was calm, deep, and steady. "Why not?" Eleanor snapped. "Are you too busy? Is your firm too important for family?" "No," Marcus said. "I cannot sue her because she didn't break the law." Jason shot up from his chair. "Didn't break the law," Jason shouted, his face turning red. "She bankrupted me. Marcus, she hid the debt. She omitted material facts. That is fraud." Marcus slowly unbuckled his briefcase. The click of the brass latches sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. He pulled out a thick document. It was the settlement agreement, the same one Jason had signed without reading. Marcus placed the document on the coffee table. He smoothed it out with his hand. Jason, Marcus said, "Do you recognize this?" "Of course I do," Jason spat. "That is the divorce paper." Marcus flipped to page 14. He pointed to a paragraph that was highlighted in yellow. "Read this," Marcus said. "I don't need to read it," Jason yelled. "I lived it." "Read it," Marcus commanded. His voice had a steel edge to it now, the voice he used in federal court. Jason froze. He looked at the paper. He squinted. It says, Jason mumbled, reading aloud, that the husband acknowledges he has been provided with full access to all corporate and personal financial records, including but not limited to tax filings, mortgage covenants, and debt schedules. The husband waives his right to further discovery and accepts the assets and liabilities as is. Marcus flipped to the next page. He pointed to another highlighted section. "And this," Marcus asked. "The husband specifically assumes responsibility for the director's loan in the amount of $2 million, Jason read. His voice was getting quieter. "And this?" Marcus flipped again. "The husband acknowledges that the wife's departure may trigger default clauses in third-party contracts, including the Henderson Group and Global Trust Bank," Jason read. He stopped. He swallowed hard. Marcus closed the folder. He looked at Jason. He looked at Eleanor. She didn't hide anything, Jason Marcus said. She put it in bold print. She put it in the table of contents. She handed you the map to the minefield, and you used it to light your cigar. Eleanor gasped. But she knew he wouldn't read it, Eleanor argued. That is bad faith. It is not bad faith, Marcus corrected her. It is due diligence. In the eyes of the law, Jason is a sophisticated businessman. He is a CEO. The court assumes he can read. The fact that he was too busy staring at his mistress to read a legal contract is not Sarah's fault. It is his. Jason sank back into the chair. He looked defeated. So, there is nothing we can do? Jason asked weakly. No loophole. Marcus leaned forward. He rested his elbows on his knees. Jason, you wanted the whole pie, Marcus said. You complained that Sarah was holding you back. You complained that she was dead weight, so she gave you exactly what you asked for. She gave you the whole pie. Marcus paused. He looked Jason right in the eye. You were just too greedy to ask why she was giving it away so easily. You grabbed the cake with both hands and shoved it in your mouth. You didn't pause to think that maybe, just maybe, the reason she was handing it over was because it was full of poison. Poison? Tiffany asked, confused. Is there poison in the house? It is a metaphor, Tiffany, Marcus said without looking at her. He stood up. He picked up his briefcase. So, to answer your question, Eleanor, no, I will not be filing a lawsuit. Because if I take this to a judge, he will not put Sarah in jail. He will laugh you out of the courtroom, and then he will order you to pay Sarah's legal fees. Jason looked up. His eyes were desperate. Marcus, help me, he pleaded. I am your brother-in-law. I am family. The bank is going to take the house. The landlord is locking the doors. I have nothing. You have to help me. Loan me the money, just until I get back on my feet. Marcus looked at Jason. He looked at the man who had mocked him at the BBQ just days ago, the man who had asked if he could afford a hubcap. I can't help you, Jason, Marcus said. Why not? Jason cried. You have the money. Because I have a conflict of interest, Marcus said. What conflict? Eleanor demanded. I am representing the other party, Marcus said. The room went silent. What? Jason whispered. Sarah hired me this morning. Marcus lied. He hadn't officially taken me on as a client, but he was protecting me. He was drawing a line in the sand. I am advising her on her new venture, Marcus continued. And as her counsel, I have to advise you that there is one more thing you should be worried about. What more could there be? Jason asked, his voice breaking. I lost the house. I lost the company. Marcus walked to the door. He stopped and turned back. The IRS, Marcus said. Jason's face went white. You assume the tax debt, Jason. $450,000. And unlike the bank, they don't send letters. They send agents. And they don't just take your house. They take your passport. He opened the door. You called Sarah a scammer, Marcus said to Eleanor. But she is the most honest person I know. She paid her debts. Now it is time for Jason to pay his. Marcus walked out. The recording continued for another 10 seconds. It captured the sound of Eleanor sobbing. It captured the sound of Tiffany asking if she could take the silver candlesticks before the bank came. And it captured the sound of Jason throwing his glass against the fireplace. The shatter of crystal was the final punctuation mark on his life as he knew it. I stopped the recording. Marcus was right. The cake was poisoned, but Jason had baked it himself. I just let him eat it. The in-laws had returned, but this time they weren't there to judge me. They were there to witness the execution, and the executioner was their own son's arrogance. I put my phone down. I looked at Leo. We are going to be okay, I told him. Uncle Marcus just cleared the path. The family meeting was over, but the federal investigation was just beginning, and I had a front row seat. The fall of Rome did not happen in a day, but the fall of Jason Pierce happened in exactly 72 hours. It started on a Thursday morning in a federal courtroom in Lower Manhattan. I was not there, but Marcus was. He went as an observer. He told me that when the judge declared the assets frozen, Jason looked like a man who had been hollowed out with a spoon. Chapter 7. Bankruptcy is a violent process. It is not a reorganization. It is a liquidation. It means that everything must go. The court appoints a trustee, and that trustee has one job: to sell everything of value to pay off the creditors. and Jason had a lot of creditors. The first thing to go was the Lamborghini. It had sat in the garage for 3 weeks gathering dust because Jason could not afford the insurance to drive it. The repossession team did not ask for the keys. They simply hooked it up and dragged it onto the flatbed. The sound of the undercarriage scraping against the concrete was the sound of Jason's ego being shredded. Tiffany was standing in the driveway when it happened. She was wearing her sunglasses, but she was not filming for Instagram. She was texting. She had been texting a lot lately. Jason ran out of the elevator lobby. He was wearing the same suit he had worn for 3 days. His hair was messy. He looked desperate. "Stop!" he screamed at the driver. "You can't take it. I have a meeting with an investor. I will have the cash by Monday." The driver did not even look at him. He just pulled the lever, and the yellow car rose into the air like a dead canary. Jason turned to Tiffany. He reached for her hand. "Babe, tell them," Jason pleaded. "Tell them who I am." Tiffany pulled her hand away. She looked at the empty spot where the car had been. Then she looked at the Range Rover, which also had a boot on the wheel. Then she looked at Jason. It was a look of pure calculation. She was doing the math just like I used to do, but her math was different. She was calculating the return on investment of staying with a broke man. The result was 0. "I am leaving, Jason," she said. Her voice was flat. "What?" Jason blinked. "Where are you going?" "My friends are going to Miami for the weekend," she said. "I am going with them." "But we have the hearing tomorrow," Jason said. "I need you there. I need you to support me." "Support you?" Tiffany laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound. "With what money, Jason? You can't even buy me a salad. You promised me a lifestyle. You promised me that Sarah was the problem and you were the rainmaker. But it turns out she was the umbrella and you are just wet." She pulled her suitcase out from behind the pillar. She had already packed. "My Uber is here," she said. "Wait!" Jason cried, grabbing her arm. "I still have the company. I can rebuild." "You don't have a company," Tiffany spat, pulling away. "You have a lawsuit. I Googled you, Jason. Your credit score is lower than my shoe size. I date CEOs, not charity cases. Don't call me." She got into the black sedan and drove away. She did not look back. Jason stood alone in the garage. The exhaust fumes from the tow truck were still hanging in the air. He had lost the car. He had lost the girl. And he was about to lose the roof over his head. The eviction notice came the next day. The bank did not wait. They changed the locks while Jason was at the bankruptcy hearing. When he came back, his key fob did not work. The doorman, the same one Jason had ignored for years, handed him a cardboard box. "What is this?" Jason asked. "Personal effects." "Mr. Pierce," the doorman said politely, "the rest of the furniture is property of the estate. You are not permitted entry." Jason looked at the box. It contained a few framed photos, a stapler, and his coffee mug. That was it. 10 years of marriage, 5 years of building a company. And it all fit in a box that used to hold photocopy paper. He slept on his parents' couch that night. But Eleanor was not a comforting mother. She was furious. She had lost her status. Her friends at the club were whispering. She blamed Jason for humiliating the family. The dinner table was a war zone. After 2 days, Jason left. He moved into a motel by the airport. It was the only place that would take cash and didn't ask for a credit card deposit. The final scene of his collapse happened a week later. I was driving to a meeting with the Henderson Group. Mr. Henderson had not only rehired me, but he had doubled my retainer. He said he liked my ruthless efficiency. I was driving my new car. It was an Audi, sleek silver and paid for in cash. I stopped at a red light near the bus terminal. It was raining, a cold gray drizzle that soaked into everything. I looked out the window, and there he was. Jason was standing at the bus stop. He was wearing his expensive suit, but it was wrinkled and stained. He wasn't wearing an overcoat. He was holding a plastic bag that looked like it contained his laundry. He was staring at the schedule, trying to figure out which bus would take him to the temp agency downtown. He looked older. The arrogance that had defined his face for a decade was gone, replaced by a permanent expression of confusion. He looked like a man who had woken up in a foreign country where he didn't speak the language. The light was red for a long time. I had 60 seconds to watch him. I thought I would feel happy. I thought I would want to roll down the window and laugh. I thought I would want to scream, "I told you so," but I didn't. I felt nothing. He was just a stranger in a wetsuit. He was a bad investment that I had written off. He was a line item in a ledger that had been closed. Jason looked up. He saw the silver car. His eyes scanned the driver. For a second, our eyes met. He froze. He recognized me. He recognized the calmness in my face. He recognized the success. He took a step forward. He opened his mouth to say something. Maybe to beg. Maybe to scream. Maybe just to say my name. The light turned green. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I didn't frown. I just pressed the gas pedal. The car moved forward, smooth and silent. I drove past him. I left him standing in the rain holding his plastic bag, waiting for a bus that was running late. I checked the rearview mirror once. He was getting smaller and smaller, just a gray speck in a gray world. And then I turned this corner, and he was gone. That was the fall of the king. He hadn't been defeated by an army. He had been defeated by his own reflection. He wanted the world to see him as a giant, but without me to cast the shadow, he was just a very small man. The rise of Sarah Pierce was not loud. It did not have strobe lights or launch parties. It happened in quiet conference rooms and on spreadsheets that balanced perfectly. I opened my new firm, SP Financial Strategies, 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I didn't have to advertise. The phone just started ringing. The clients who had left Vantage Marketing didn't just come back, they brought their friends. They knew that in a volatile market, you don't pay for charisma, you pay for competence. Marcus helped me set up the legal structure. He sat in my new office, a modest space with good light and real plants, and toasted me with a paper cup of coffee. "You know, Sarah," Marcus said, "Jason called me yesterday." I didn't look up from my laptop. "Oh, what did he want?" "He wanted to know if I could get him a job," Marcus said. "He said he has experience as a CEO." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "What did you tell him I asked?" "I told him that CEO stands for Chief Executive Officer." Marcus smiled. "And since he executed his own company, he is overqualified." I gave him the number for a warehouse that is hiring forklift drivers. It pays $15 an hour. I nodded. It was good, honest work. Better than he deserved. But the real victory wasn't the money. The real victory was Leo. With the profits from the first quarter, I enrolled Leo in a specialized private school for neurodivergent children. It was expensive, but it was worth every penny. For the first time in his life, Leo was in an environment that didn't try to fix him, but tried to understand him. I remember the day I went to pick him up after his first month. I was standing by the gate, waiting. I was nervous. Leo usually came out with his head down, wearing his headphones, avoiding eye contact. But that day, the doors opened and Leo ran out. He wasn't wearing his headphones. He was holding a drawing. He saw me. He stopped. He looked me right in the eye. "Mommy," he shouted. "Look!" I drew a bridge. I knelt down. I looked at the drawing. It was a bridge, a complex structural bridge with perfect geometric lines and color gradients. It was brilliant. "It is beautiful, Leo," I said, hugging him. The teacher walked over to me. She was smiling. "He is amazing, Mrs. Pierce," she said. "His spatial reasoning is off the charts. He helped the other kids organize the block corner today. He is a leader, a leader." Jason had called him defective. Jason had called him a burden. Jason had wanted to throw him away. I held my son's hand as we walked to the car. He was chatting happily, telling me about the different types of suspension bridges. He was happy. He was confident. He was thriving. I realized then that this was the payoff. This was the revenge. Revenge isn't about watching your enemy suffer. That is just entertainment. Revenge is about thriving in the exact places where they said you would fail. Jason wanted the objects. He wanted the things he could touch. The house, the car, the trophy wife. He thought those things made him wealthy. But objects rust. Objects can be repossessed. Objects lose value. I took the things he couldn't see. I took the discipline. I took the resilience. I took the love of my son. Jason ended up with a box of junk. I ended up with a life. That evening I sat on the balcony of our new apartment. It wasn't a penthouse. It was on the 4th floor. But it had a view of the park. Leo was inside building a Lego set that looked like the Empire State Building. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. Deposit received $150,000. Client Henderson Group. I took a sip of wine. I thought about the man at the bus stop. I wondered if he was still waiting. I wondered if he realized yet that no one was coming to pick him up. He had spent his whole life thinking he was the driver. He never understood that he was just a passenger in a car that I was steering. And when he kicked me out, he didn't grab the wheel. He just let go of the only person who knew the map. He wanted everything material, so I gave it to him. I gave him the weight of ownership without the strength to carry it. I crushed him with his own greed. But I kept the only asset that appreciates over time. I kept the future. I walked inside and sat down next to Leo. "What are we building next, Mommy?" he asked, looking up with bright, intelligent eyes. I smiled. "Anything we want, Leo. We are building anything we want." If you enjoyed seeing a greedy husband lose everything to the wife he underestimated, hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories of justice. And tell me in the comments below, do you think Jason got off too easy? Should I have sued him for child support even though he is broke, or was letting him rot in his own failure the perfect punishment? I read every comment. Until next time, remember, the smartest person in the room is usually the quietest, and the most dangerous person is the one who knows where the money is hidden. Stay sharp, stay solvent, and never sign a paper you haven't read.